if you don't involve yourself in this stuff on the front end, all of a sudden you realize that people like Bob Fenton and Tina are parachuting into your community. You know, we have Bob Fenton. Bob is the regional administrator, Region 9, Region IX of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. You know, he's been with them since 1996, it looks like. Numerous large-scale events, 50 federal disasters, Hurricane Katrina, the 4 Florida hurricanes, you know, all kinds of different stuff. Going to move over Thom Porter on the far side, CAL FIRE, Southern Region Chief. Some of you might remember that Thom spoke to us at our LEDGE conference and really focused on the governor's executive order and how that applies with enhanced vegetation work, forestry work. A lot of us are very familiar also with with a lot of the tree mortality task force work, but the additional funding that's also out of the governor's budget this year. 100 million, 96 more, potential 196 going to different causes. And then Tina Curry, Deputy Director of Planning, Preparedness, and Prevention from Cal Office of Emergency Services. Tina specifically worked recently, you might have gotten a letter from some of us, sent out to make comments on the state hazard mitigation plan. And so Tina, I want to thank you and thank Mark Ghilarducci and others for you know, what you do and bringing us out here. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to start on the right. Thom, you're going to jump in. We're going to talk a little bit about, from his perspective, the Fireside Emergency Services report. Tina, you know, what's Cal OES's role in being your bridge to all avenues? And then bat and cleanup is Big Bob Fenton ready to go.
The CAL FIRE piece of this, resilience and then the leveraging government resources. What I'm going to say is I'm going to kind of take you through a scenario. We heard this morning from Rondi and then Emma and Dr. Joe about the different things that happen kind of after the fact, and each one of them said these are things you need to be thinking about now. Pre-plan. So as we do in the fire service and emergency response world, we pre-plan all the time. We game, we exercise, we do all of those things that you do as well. But we need to do those interactively. We need to do those together and look at these from a bigger perspective. Emma's talk about the schools and how they're a part of the recovery and the response. I mean, that was a very important piece that she and a kernel that she brought to the table that a lot of places don't think about how they can use those locations. But response. CAL FIRE and the fire management agency folks, we come to your incidents and we bring calm to chaos. That's what we're doing. We're looking to put that fire out or mitigate the emergency, but it's calm to chaos. That's what we are here to do. And we're here to do that throughout the state, any place in the state, sometimes over our borders, so that all of you can start to do what you need to do to get ready for what's coming, because you have the difficult work. We have the glamorous, yes, dirty, yes, hard, but the glamorous work of coming in and being heroes and then going home at the end of it. And the rest of you are left in your communities for months, sometimes years, dealing with the after effects. And we know that. I'm not trying to downplay where we are, and we are part of your community as well. But that's really what we're here to do. Bring calm to the chaos. So in doing that, there are a couple things that can help you and your local fire departments or your local CAL FIRE units. Work ahead of time to understand what the fire mitigation or fire management assistance grant application looks like, and what pieces of information you can help the local department with in filling those out. because those have to be filled out while the incident is ongoing. That's something that you can assist with your local fire department or emergency management folks while the fire is going in the early stages. And then as the incident starts to wind down and we're moving into damage inspection and survey, there's a lot of help that you can bring to bear in doing that. And that is key toward getting the next pieces of recovery going for those businesses and homeowners that have lost property in an incident. So work with your local, again, jurisdictional fire department. I keep saying that because we are in Santa Barbara and CAL FIRE doesn't have a presence here, but most of the state, that's going to be us, but in places Santa Barbara, Ventura, and other contract counties, and then other local jurisdictional areas, that responsibility will fall on the local government, of which you would know better than myself for your own area. So that's an important piece, and that will be a report that will be generated that will be very key to getting assistance from the folks to my right. And then the other thing that has revived and will continue to be a focus of us at the state level on the fire response is watershed emergency response teams. We will be on larger fires putting out, in conjunction with Cal OES, teams that are looking at what the effects of the fire or incident are on your watershed, and then the infrastructure that's within that watershed. So it could be roads, could be bridges, could be dams, could be a lot of different things that are included in that. But the WERT, as we call them, will develop a report. And the report is not to call out anything but call your attention to the most critical items that are out there that you might want to pay attention to most quickly. And there are lots of stories of the use of the WERT report from here at Montecito after the Thomas fire. I'm not going to go into those, but it is something that we're going to continue to do and support going forward. We've kind of wavered in that in the last few years, but it's back and we're going to maintain that effort. And so all of these things will help you to have the data and the information you'll need to share in order to get further disaster assistance through either Cal OES and the California Disaster Assistance Act grants, or future FEMA and federal funding that may become available. And so really what CAL FIRE's role in all of this and leveraging all of the state emergency response is to, at the same time we're reducing the chaos that you're dealing with out there, it's to give you a chance to work with us to develop all of the needs that you're going to have to feed the machine to get to those access those pots of money and those assistances that are out there for you once we start to pull back and get ready for our next event that we're going to go to. So that's how we are we organize our efforts. We aren't going to go away, but we need to get ready for the next chaos. So some of the things that we're doing on the front end, because we're not just a response agency. I'm going to talk to the CAL FIRE piece of this specifically. And before I get the hook. So the executive order that came out a couple of months ago, it talks to vegetation treatments and use of controlled fires, or that's the governor's words, prescribed fire as we call it, from 250,000 acres a year, which is about what we do statewide now. And it's not all burns. That's some of that's timber harvest type of activities and the cleanup that goes after that. Also, other types of mechanical fuels treatment. But we're going to increase that by twofold to 500,000 acres under this newly enacted forest management task force that the governor convened. We're going to develop a certified burning program where we're going to be training individuals and groups that can meet the yet to be determined insurance standards and training standards to do additional prescribed burning outside of what we are doing as our own department or what the Forest Service or others. So we're going to increase the capability to do prescribed burning throughout California through that method. We're going to boost the education and outreach. Some of the things that were in the panel before us that are more geared toward that proactive. Why do we need to do this vegetation treatment, and how does that equate to protection of you and your communities? And also the values in the natural systems that are protected by doing that. Streamlining permitting processes. That's an ongoing process, and there are a lot of bills that are trying to help us do that. Some of them are a little bit of a hindrance to us doing that. I'll let you make the decision on which ones those are. Innovative use of forest products. There are things, glulam beams. Anybody seen one of those that it's just all looks like a bunch of shoestrings all pressed together, but it's a structural beam. None of those are made in California. So we have an entire industry that could spring out of the forest sector in California to produce those types of things, which we're using in buildings throughout California now. All of them are coming from outside of the state. So this is another measure to try and boost that effort in the state. And then grants. Grants. We had greenhouse gas to the tune of $200 million last year, plus another 10 for urban forestry. Those are all in process. Some of the awardees or potential awardees are working through their final process, and we'll be getting those dollars out to the landscape for fuels reduction type work. There is, in the budget that was just signed this week, an additional $160 million for the same and $5 million for urban forestry. So those are all coming through. There will be a new grant cycle in September, so encourage your folks that are looking at vegetation management in your counties to look into those grants through CAL FIRE to do that type of work. Another item of particular interest, and I was assured that I would be asked again, maybe not at this meeting, but by this group in the future, was our 6 fuels crews. It doesn't sound like a lot statewide, but we're going to have 6 dedicated fuels crews. They were kind of disappeared from the budget a couple of weeks ago and then reappeared in the final budget that was signed. So we will have permanent 6 crews, and 3 of those will be here in the southern part of the state, 3 in the north, and they will not be fire-going crews. Yes, they'll jump on a fire if they're nearby and it's small and close, but once they're done with that shift, they're pretty much coming back and going back to work on fuels. So that's one of the things that we'll be doing directly here throughout the state.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. I'll just kind of launch from where Thom to expand sort of the state role in all of this. And for those of you who aren't terribly familiar with Cal OES. I know a lot of you are. We're a state agency, obviously, and not unlike your local emergency service department. Our job is kind of twofold. One is to band together all the other capabilities that state government has that needs to lend a hand in disasters, both in getting ready for them, but also in responding and recovering. Obviously, CAL FIRE has tremendous direct authority to go out and take care of emergencies when needed, and some other state agencies do as well. But for those that don't, we have the authority to bring them together to help you as communities solve problems and disasters when they arise and bring those resources to bear. The other part is to be really a go-between to access different programs that are available at the state and federal level that Bob will talk about. A big part of what Cal OES does is pass through for grants. The vast majority of our budget is authority to pass through. It's over $1 billion. A lot of those are federal programs. Some of them are state. We do things that aren't disaster related per se, like victims of crime programs and some other things that are in the emergency realm. So that's a big part of it. And then what I do in most of the time, let's get a little feedback, is planning and preparedness. And I'll go back to that in a little bit, but that encompasses the whole suite of things of getting ready, to include writing plans for response, hazard mitigation, continuity, I know is another one that's a big interest, but also training and exercising, training your staff, exercising against those plans so that we're always practicing. So we do those things, and then we help facilitate that at the community level. Hazard mitigation is a big important topic. That's buying down risk. Always going to be more need than there are the financial resources to do that. That's just an ongoing dilemma that we have, but the first step in that is to articulate what's important to you and to your community in risk reduction. Every community is obviously unique for a million different ways, and so the first step to even be able to access those funding opportunities is to have put that down into a hazard mitigation plan, and my team's job is to help you do that. We always try to make those plans, you turn them in, it's not a pass-fail. We will work with you until it's a pass, and ultimately FEMA approves that. But really important, and most communities have them, which is great. They do have to be updated, but there's resources available to do it, financial resources, especially now. And I'll get back to that again in a second. And then, a big part of our job is to actually be there to mobilize our state-level emergency operations center. And we are there when counties are helping the cities and the other entities within their geographic boundaries. We're there to then support that effort when things go wrong, and again mobilize the state family, and then we're the conduit to the federal government. So all of that hopefully comes together as one seamless group of support for you when the time comes. And we saw that exercised, of course, over and over again in 2017, and worked together a lot to support your communities in disasters. So, with that, there are financial recovery programs available to both, help you get back some of those response costs. Fire management assistant grants is one way. I'm sure Bob will talk about public infrastructure, what we call public assistance, as well as help to the individuals that were affected by the event. So our job is to kind of stay the course all the way through the recovery. Many of you are right in the thick of that right now. It gets much more complicated as the event goes on, obviously, with the larger hodgepodge of programs that come to bear. But really, we're lined up to be that for you as the support to access the things you need, whether it's from other state agencies, state programs, private sector, or the federal government. But in terms of I know this is about leveraging resources, just to get into some specifics about what's available to you. In terms of planning, we try to construct things so that they are usable regardless of what layer in government or what element of California you represent. So yes, we have a state emergency plan, we have a state hazard mitigation plan, but those truly are representative of the state of California and everything that's in it, not just state government. So that way it can serve as a tool to be modeled if that's helpful. or at least to represent what you all have done at communities and how that rolls up to the state. So our state emergency plan is relatively up to date, talks, as you would expect, about what expectations are, how disasters play out, what's the role of the different state agencies, and really just articulates what's expected to come, how things come together in an emergency. State mitigation plan is just that for risk reduction, is very, very new. In fact, has just been released for public comment, and we're in the process of updating that as well. We're available to help you to create those at the local level as well. Both the local level emergency operations plans as well as your local level hazard mitigation plans. In terms of recovery, we had done a lot of work. We execute the traditional, what I'd say, recovery programs all the time, the infrastructure, the individuals and households. The bigger kind of bucket of long-term recovery is not something that has had as much prescribed planning again, and that's something we recognized in this disaster. That was actually something that, how I met a lot of you was because I actually stepped away from my day job and went to help with the recovery programs, and so recognizing we needed to do more there. The federal government has published a recovery framework that we are dusting off and doing some more work against to create a California recovery framework, and that's looking at beyond the FEMA and Cal-OES programs, but looking at things like economic recovery, long-term health, housing obviously was a big one in the fire disasters this year, and really just kind of laying out what are the components, how should that come together. It was a need that we recognized that came to us again and again. Obviously we were in it, we were doing the best we could to help respond to that need, but as a result of this, we're going to have more of that written down and available to you should it be helpful again as a model for the long-term recovery programs. And I just want to end before I get the hook with an emphasis on what's available to you for training. There's lots and lots of programs available, not just from Cal-OES, but just across the board. Not all of it costs money. It really is, disasters truly are a national issue for obvious reasons, and the training and the tactics to respond to them and how we get people ready to do it is really more and more become based on national standards and not something that's just so specialized for California that we have to customize everything. So there's a lot of stuff that FEMA's Emergency Management Institute has available online. We will help you design a program that meets your needs, but the importance of having staff, not just the emergency folks like us that do it all the time, but the other departments that are expected to come in and lend a hand. There is a lot that's available to you that's not necessarily at a high cost, especially as we move to being more nimble and adaptable to help one another. Communities are helping communities, states are helping states. The feds are moving around throughout disasters. So the techniques by which we train people as a result are becoming much more the same across the board. So I think that's a helpful thing because a lot more resources for training are available, and the training goes a lot further for a lot of need. So we definitely would be happy to assist you with your training needs as well. So I'll stop there. I'm sure there'll be questions after, and let Bob take it.
Yeah, Tina, one of the things that we talked about, Ms. Curry, is basically the, how OES in many ways is kind of your disaster navigator when you get into this system, because you got to figure out no matter how prepared you are, you need people who have an independent mind who can help you kind of connect the dots. As we go over to Mr. Fenton, I think one quote was shocking to me, which was NACO had put together this report that said 813 out of 3,090 counties, a full quarter of the counties in the entire United States were under federal disaster declaration this past year. I think there was $16 billion cost plus emergencies, and that's primarily because of inclement weather, extreme weather. Whereas before, if you would have gone 5 years ago, it's more than 50% of the counties, but because of the slow-moving drought. So you've seen a lot of it. What's the best thing that we need to know?
Well, thanks. Appreciate you having me here. Let me first start out with thanking all of you at the local level for what you do, because in order to be able to effectively respond to just a significant number of events over the last year, it's really taken a team effort. And my job is to support your state and local government. And so you're critical that you're in a leadership role before disasters and after disasters, and have plans and understand your communities and know what the risks are and what the needs are so that we could plug in. We'll always be there to provide you technical assistance, but the more prepared you are, the more successful the recovery will be. Let me just talk a little bit really quickly. As I heard Kevin McGowan start, he talked about the beautiful view out there and told you all not to fall asleep. The difference between Kevin at the county emergency manager and me at the federal and Tina, we heard him say that, and we both looked at it and said, I wonder if we're in a tsunami zone. And how high does the tsunami zone go? And can we run to the hill? And how long would it take us to get there? So that's kind of our thought process, right? Kevin's looking at the view, and we're thinking of the risk, the threat, the contingency plan to get there, and all those kind of things. And so that kind of puts in perspective, what we do to help provide resources to the state and local government, whether it's helping in the planning or equipping or those kind of things. I really quickly want to start off and just talk about our strategic plan at FEMA, looking at the next 5 years and tell you where we're focused at. And the first area is really focused at building a culture of preparedness. And, I think we need to do collectively a better job of ensuring our resiliencies, our communities are resilient ahead of these incidents, and to help reduce loss of life and economic disruption. As we look across the country now, less than 70% of Americans are prepared for disasters or have the economic resources to withstand a disaster. I've seen some studies where 60% of Americans have less than $500 in their bank account. And so we need to be prepared for that, and we need to do things that reduce the risk. One of the things that FEMA is trying to do now is shift to a pre-disaster type of mitigation. You can see it out there in some of the recent legislation, where instead of doing it post, and post-disaster mitigation has been very successful, and I think from the last years of events, we have about $500 million available from the fires and floods for mitigation opportunities for the state of California. But how do we bring that pre-disaster and address those risks before the event occurs is one of the things that our administrator is looking at doing. And then as far as preparing our communities, I think getting back to grassroots type of efforts, getting local governments, the citizens involved, things like NERT teams, CERT teams, neighborhood groups, all help in not only building the community, but leveraging capabilities so that when you get to the big events and the resources aren't sufficient, either immediately in the community or in the neighboring community, how do you leverage all those resources, including the public? So we could definitely do a better job there. Another area we're trying to focus on is how to manage risk through insurance. And I think we can all do, FEMA's working with communities and insurers to close the national gap across the nation with regard to insurance. And when you look at these big events that we've had in the last year, the average amount of assistance an individual that's lost their home is getting from FEMA, the average amount is $4,000. The average amount they're getting from their insurance company is $100,000. Okay, and the max grant I could provide is $34,000. I think in the fires, the Northern California fires, I think it was like 20 to 30 people got max grants, just to give you an idea. The system's not set up to rebuild your house or to provide you a new house. And so insurance does that. And we need to make sure that in these events we're lucky in fires, most people have insurance for fires, although some people let it lapse in order to reduce their annual expenditures and conserve money and use that money toward other things, which is unfortunate. But in events like floods and earthquakes where it takes special types of insurance, not everyone carries that. So we need to do a better job of educating the public of that and making sure that they understand that FEMA alone, nor all of us here are going to be able to help them recover. They're going to have to be part of that solution, and insurance is a critical part. The second area we're focused on is readying the nation for catastrophic disasters. We provide about $2.7 billion in non-disaster grants a year for planning, for exercising, for training, for equipping, and those kind of things. One of the things FEMA is doing now is moving teams and personnel out to the states. How do we get better integrated to states and local communities with our staff, and how do we become work together hand by hand, not just during an event, but prior to an event. And so we're rolling out teams now where we're placing them in the state headquarters, state EOCs, and to work with the states on a normal basis. And then the third area that we're kind of focused on is reducing the complexity of FEMA, which, as you've anyone who's been through a disaster and has to go through all the different agencies to apply, probably has seen the complexity. So how do we simplify the process, putting survivors first? I think one of the big things to simplifying it is our strategic plan. I mean, we've put it on one page. I've never seen a 5-year strategic plan for an agency our size be able to boil it down to a one-pager. So there's the start of reducing complexity. But we have to reduce the administrative, the bureaucratic burdens, and be able to assist more quickly. So those are some of the areas that we're focused on. As we go past looking at disasters, you could have it and you could circle it around. As you go, as you start looking at disasters and when it strikes a community, I just want to talk about this last year and what it takes to recover, and especially the magnitude of the events that happened this last year. Really, the president gives us the authority to provide assistance to, one, help individuals, and two, replace damaged infrastructure. But communities still face a gap in recovery, and there's a lot of federal agencies out there that have resources. Even though in the last year we've provided billions of dollars in California alone for the assistance, including having a debris operation in Northern California, which was the most debris removed since the 1906 earthquake. And then in this past December, we saw the largest fire in the state's history with the Thomas fire, and the devastating mudslides that followed that. Recovery is a long process, no doubt about it. But signs of rebuilding and the progress has become more evident each day. I was surprised and happy to see the first person move in Coffee Park up in Northern California. And I was happy to see the efforts that we took to remove the debris from the creeks, the basins, and all that helped with no additional flooding and mud flows down in Southern California. But it really takes a team effort, and there's many federal agencies beyond that. We talked about the mitigation funding that's available, and over $500 million available. And how do we use that? What do we do that for? We continue to, when we look at land use, we continue to build into areas where there's wildland-urban interface. And so you, as local governments, you're kind of the lead for this, right? You make those decisions of where you're building. How do we make sure there's sufficient green space around those areas so that when we rebuild, especially after an event, when we've lost a lot of homes and everyone wants to rebuild quickly, and we want to issue permits and get the system moving so we can start the economic engine again, how do we do that smartly? One of the things I tell my team is measure twice, cut once. The last thing we want to do is put someone back into the similar situation to have the same condition occur again, right? So how do we do that? And I think leveraging mitigation funding to create green space or to create other things that will prevent the same threat from impacting the same community again is something that can be done. There's a lot of funding out there through other federal agencies, to include HUD. They provide $124 million for unmet recovery needs, past what we can provide, $88 million for mitigation. U.S. Economic Development Agency, who I think was just down here, has $93 million available for the West Coast. And then U.S. Small Business Administration provided $135 million for home loans this past year, $22 million for business loans. USDA has provided money through the Emergency Watershed Program, USDA Rural Development to focus on community facility loans, and then Rural Business Development Program supports technical assistance training, and then there's Farm Services Agency emergency loans. So there's a lot of resources out there, but we need to be able to put them together in a package that makes sense and that you understand what they are, and that we're working with you through our long-term recovery committees that you've established, and that you're taking the lead as we bring the resources together to help you get where you need to go as far as recovery. Last couple things I just want to touch upon is past monetary resources. We provide a tremendous amount of technical assistance to you, when asked. And one of the, I think, great examples that needs to be highlighted is down here in Santa Barbara, the request to work with us to produce maps immediately following the event to kind of relook at the flood risks from the event, what's changed due to the fires, the topography, and to produce maps. And then for Santa Barbara to be able to adopt those maps and use them as an advisory product for the safety of the residents in mind, and the value of rebuilding to smarter and safer standards, I think, should be commended. It's a tough thing to do, to stand up and make a decision like that. But because of that decision, it's going to, mitigate, it's going to reduce risk, it's going to put less people in harm's way, and it's establishing a safer Santa Barbara. So I commend Santa Barbara for taking those actions and rebuilding smarter, and I think there's many opportunities for all of us to learn from a lot of the best practices that have happened over the last year throughout California to take similar efforts in mind as we rebuild our communities. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you for your partnership. Appreciate it. Brian?